Tonight, I want to dive right into this message because I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited because it's been a long time since we've been in a message series, or at least it feels like it has been. Like, I've really been like twitching because like I hadn't got to like preach in a while, and it's been like burning up. And so I'm excited, like I'm jazzed up. I may move a little bit more than normal, but it's just because it's been a minute since we've really like sat in a series and walked through week by week, and this is one that I'm so excited for. And so if you're here tonight, you're at the perfect time because this is part one, week one, and so that means you can just keep on coming every single week and you'll already know exactly where we're at, because we're starting a new series called I Want to Believe But. And I want to show you, because this is week one, where we're going to be going over the next 4 messages, because this is what we're going to wrap up summer with. But I know many of you are probably going to be able to relate to this series or identify someone in your life just by the titles of these messages, because maybe they've expressed these feelings to you, or you know that they're in this place by conversations you've had, or maybe you've been in this place or are still in this place. And so just know it would be amazing if you can bring those people with you to these services, because we're speaking directly to the heart of these mindsets. And the mindset is one that I believe is increasingly popular in our culture, of people who want to believe, they would like to believe, but there's something that's keeping them, holding them back from believing. People say there's no way God doesn't exist. Those people are out there that are just firm on that stance, that say, man, that whole thing is just stupid. But there's also a lot more people who want to believe, but they've had crisis in their life. They've had tragedy. They've been hurt. They've been disappointed. Something's happened. And they say, I want to believe, but I just can't. Not after fill in the blank. They say, how can I believe in a God that is constantly, it feels like, just screwing me over with life? And so through this series, I want to argue that those people who find themselves in that space are not really rejecting God, but rather they're rejecting a false view of who they think God is. They have a distorted view of God. And I'm going to give you some examples about what these views are, about what we're going to talk about. And we'll start with what we're going to look at next week. Next week, we're going to look at what I call goosebump God. Right? And this would be for people who say, I want to believe in God, but man, I just don't feel Him. I tried reading the Bible, but I didn't feel anything. I came to church, but I didn't feel anything when everyone else was putting their hands up. I want to believe in God, but I just don't feel Him. I don't have those moments like it seems everyone else does. Part 3, we're going to talk about what I'm going to call heartless God. I would like to believe in God, but have you seen all of the horrible things going on in the world? How can I believe in a God who allows school shootings and starvation? And I prayed for this to happen, but the opposite turned out to happen. How can I believe in a God who doesn't seem to care? And then week 4, to wrap it up, I'm going to talk about what we call killjoy God. That I would really love to believe, but man, I'm not following all those rules. It seems like there's just so many things you have to do and so many rules, and that's just going to make me into a boring person, and I want to have fun. That whole no sex before marriage thing sounds pretty lame. Like, man, I want to go drink and party and like have fun while I'm in high school. I want to believe in God, but man, there's all these restrictions. And there's all these different reasons, and tonight we're going to start with the first one. But before we get into that, I want to do something fun. At least I think it's going to be fun, because I like to have fun. Even in our messages, I like to have fun. But in order for this to be fun, and for us to have fun in a different message, I need you to give me some fun back. Like, I need you to engage with me, or the next time I have an idea to do this, I'm just talk myself out of it because you are lame. But I don't believe that you are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list off some TV shows that are from my childhood, and I realize my childhood is not that far removed from yours, but I believe it is probably very different. And so some of our younger leaders can probably relate. Some of our older leaders, you probably had to watch some of these just for your kids. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to list off some TV shows from my childhood. And I just want you to respond by cheering, putting up a hand, giving me a little holler if you've actually watched one of these shows. Right? Not just heard of them, not just you know the theme song because it's like a throwback retro song that like everybody sings, but like you've actually watched an episode. All right, so we'll start easy. We'll start with a classic. All right, how many of you have actually sat down and watched an episode of Hannah Montana? Okay, mostly girls, but I respect the couple guys that raised their hand. Okay, what about The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody? Anybody? Okay. What about Wizards of Waverly Place? I know we're in church, but I had cool parents that were like, magic is fine. Like, you ain't going to convert to Satanism because you watch a Disney show. Like, all right, now we're going a little bit older. What about Kim Possible? Anybody? A couple of you? Okay. That's So Raven? Fewer, but still, okay. What about, like, even older? Like Lizzie McGuire? Okay. Some of y'all still feel it. What about, like, Phil of the Future? Yeah, see, boy, we got, okay. But the thing about these shows was this, is that if you wanted to watch them, you actually had to, like, make sure you were in front of the TV at that exact moment the show came on. And I know some of you are like, that is the craziest thing you've ever heard. Like, you just want to watch something, you just pull it up and you watch it. But, like, if it came on Friday night, like 8, 7 Central, because that's what they said, like, we understood what time zones were, but they always said this show comes on at 8, 7 Central. And I was like, what does that mean? But anyways, that's not the point. What you had to do is if you wanted to watch it, you had to be there Friday night at 8 in front of your TV. Because if you weren't, it was gone. Like, it was not going to, like, come on the next day. Like, it was gone. And so you actually had to be there and watch it. And the thing about it also was that there were these things called commercials. I know this is crazy. Like, not YouTube commercials that are like a minute. These were like 3-4 minute, like, long things. And now, I know I'm not that much older, so a lot of you can probably relate to this. But the point is, we live in a very different world today. Like, how many of you have binge watched even one show this summer? Like, you watched the full thing. You don't have to be ashamed. This isn't like a diss. Okay, yeah. See, that's what I mean. You can watch like whole seasons of a show in a weekend, or like even in a day if you're really committed and bored. Like, we live in something today that is known as the on-demand generation. On-demand generation because everything you want, you can pretty much have at that moment, on demand. And so here's my thought process. Because everything we want now is on demand. I want it now. Like Amazon overnight delivery, like, is like free if you got Prime. But everything is on demand. And I believe there's many people who want to believe in an on-demand God. I prayed for it, but he didn't do it, so now I don't believe in God. God should do what I want him to do when I ask him to do it. And this may be your story, right, where you prayed and you begged for God to step in and save your parents' marriage, but it didn't happen. Where are you in that, God? You may be a generous person, and you do all the things that are right and good, but yet you still feel like you're struggling and being mistreated. You're like, God, what's up with that? You might have prayed and prayed for someone in your family to be healed, but they weren't healed. God, what's up with that? And so often, when God doesn't do what you and I think he should do, we know that he could do, we get frustrated. And some even decide, God either must not be real, he's not powerful, he's not good, or he just doesn't care. Because I want to believe, but where's my on-demand God? Why didn't he do what I wanted him to do? Where is my on-demand God? And the answer is quite simply, on-demand God does not exist. Right? An on-demand God does not exist, because so often you hear people say, I want to believe in God, but I prayed for him to get rid of my depression and he didn't. I want to believe in God, but he didn't heal my loved one from cancer. I want to believe in God, but he didn't do what I wanted him to do, so he must not be real, not be powerful, not be good, or he just doesn't care. But I'm telling you, that version of God does not exist. An on-demand God does not exist. And what we have to do is understand where we fit into the narrative, right? Into the grand story of God and creation and eternity. And if you're taking notes, I'm going to make this really, really simple. All right, make sure you get this down. We'll make sure it stays on the screen for a hot minute, but make sure you get this. I'm going to make it real simple. God does not exist to serve us. We exist to serve him. God does not exist to serve us, but rather we exist to serve him. God does not exist to do whatever we want, whenever we want him to do it. Yes, he answers our prayers, but his highest calling is not to do what we think he should do. God does not exist to serve us, but rather we exist to serve him. And so we have to recognize that after reading the Bible, examining Scripture, we can look at it and see we are not the main character of the Bible. God is the main character. So what that means is that God is not our genie in the sky to where we can say the right combination of words in our prayer and rub this lamp and we get 3 wishes and God's just instantly going to do what we want him to do. He's not this like holy Coke machine where you go to church and you serve and you read the word and you put in the right amount and then you push a button and out comes your perfectly answered prayer. That's not the God that we know. No, God is the creator of the universe. And we are his creation. We are the created. He is the potter and we are the clay that he's molding into his image. He is the Lord of all, and we are simply his servants doing his work on earth. We need to understand that on-demand God does not exist because he does not exist to serve us, but rather we exist to serve him. And now that we've established that, some of you may be asking, okay, well then what is his role? Like if he's not here to do what I want him to do, then who is he? What does he do in my life then, if not that? And I want to unpack a little bit of who he is. That's my secret goal of this whole series, is to help us all get to know God better. But we're going to do it by recognizing who he's not. And so if God is not an on-demand God, then who is he? And tonight I'm going to show you 3 qualities of the heart of God that will tell us exactly who he is. And the first one is this: God's heart is always loving. God's heart is always loving. The best example of this, I think, comes from parenting, but I'm not a parent. And so since I don't have kids, I'm going to use you as examples, because y'all are the closest thing I got to kids, even though y'all are like not far off from my age, some of y'all that are like seniors. But here's the thing about it, and this is true of parent-to-kid relationships just like it's true of our relationships. Just like with kids, there's never a time that you don't love your kids. There's never a time I don't love each and every one of you. Even if this is your first time here, welcome, I love you. But there are times that you don't like your kids. There are times you may want to knock them into next week, but you can't do that. Not as a parent, and definitely not as me, because that's a whole other thing. But you wouldn't do that, because you're better than that. But you always love them. And the second is that there are times that you don't do what your kids want you to do. You always love them, but there are times that you don't do what they want you to do, even if you have the power to do it. You know, I tell you all the time, don't forget to sign your forms and turn in your deposits for whatever it is that's coming up. And then the day comes and you ask if you can go, and I'm like, hey, I love you, but I'm sorry, you can't. Like, I'm not being mean, but it's full, and you didn't do what I asked you to do, so nope, sorry. Why? Not because I want to punish you or I want you to miss out. I'd love for you to be there. But because I'm trying to instill something in you, make you learn something from it. Don't hit volleyballs or play football inside. We say this all the time, not pointing fingers at anybody, but we say this all the time. And then sometimes it's 10 minutes before service and you go, hey, can you go like find a ladder and get our ball down because it got stuck up there in that little ceiling tray? And what I'm going to say is, maybe, but it's 10 minutes till service and I've been telling you to go play outside. So in this case, you're kind of on your own. Not because I don't have the power to go get your ball, not because I don't love you, because I do, but it's the fact that because I love you, I'm not always going to do exactly what you want me to do, because sometimes rather than doing something for you, I'm trying to develop something in you. We need to understand that even when God doesn't do exactly what we want, even though we know He has the power to do it and we believe that He could and we think that He should, it doesn't mean He doesn't love us. Now, God's heart is always loving. He always has our best interest at heart. In fact, Romans chapter 8, I want to read you a portion of it. Romans 8 is a very powerful chapter, and verse 35 says this. It says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? Let me update this a little bit, because chances are you won't be naked this week with a sword pointed at you. But on the off chance that you are, text me afterwards, because I want to know, and that's a crazy story and I want to hear it. But let's update this a little bit. All right? What shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall family trouble? Shall failing a test or getting benched separate us from the love of God? Or if we get a little bit more serious, shall relational breakdowns separate us from the love of God? Shall sickness and disease separate us from the love of God? Shall depression or anxiety separate us? And we can answer that question this way. In verse 37, Paul says, no. He says, in all things we are more than conquerors. In all these things, through Him who loved us. He continues on, for I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. God's heart is always loving. It says there's nothing that can separate you from that love. God's heart is always loving. And so we need to understand that God does not prove His love for us when He answers our prayers. No, God proved His love for us when He sent His Son to die a death that He didn't deserve. Let me say that again. God does not prove His love when He does what you ask Him to do. No, He proved His love when He sent His Son while we were still sinners. Christ died for us. God's heart is always loving. There's never been a time that He hasn't loved you. But He's not always going to do what you think He should do. What shall separate us from the love of God? We see the answer is nothing, because in all these things we are more than conquerors. Nothing can separate us from the love of God, because His heart is always loving. The second thought about God is that God's ways are always higher. His ways are always higher than our ways. And we need to just unpack this for a moment, because as a pastor, there are so many times I've heard people say this, and they've asked this of me, and they said, why did this happen? Explain this to me. Help me to understand why this is. And I've got to tell you, just like I would tell them when I don't understand, man, I'm not going to fake it. I'm not even going to attempt to explain something that I don't know, because truthfully, it's dangerous for us to try and explain what God is thinking in some of these times. That is like way above my pay grade. That is where I take faith in God over my own wisdom and ability to understand. When you see a child who is born with a deformity or born handicapped, you say, well, why did that happen? I don't know. I have no explanation. Or a good person in the community or a family member has been, killed in the prime of their life. The drunk driver lives and the other person dies. And you say, well, why did that happen? I don't know. I don't understand it. You see natural disasters and terrorist attacks take the lives of so many innocent people, and you say, why them? Why would God allow that to happen? And I don't know. I don't understand, and there are so many things that I can't explain, and I'm not even going to attempt to explain. But what I will do is this: I will embrace what Isaiah says in chapter 55, verse 8. Look at what God says in this passage. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." You can take comfort in recognizing that God is wiser than you and I are. That God is already in tomorrow. Time doesn't hold him. You can take comfort in realizing that he is a sovereign and good God. That he has the end in mind. That he's using even the things I don't like to shape me and mold me into the image of his Son. Because his ways, his knowledge, his power goes well beyond the limited understanding that you and I have. His ways are higher. His ways are different, and oftentimes you'll recognize, even when you don't get it in the moment, you can look back and say, now I see. Now I can see years later that this path was better for me, that there was good that came from this situation. Listen, some of you are going through something at this very moment, and you hate it. Like you hate it, you hate it, you hate it. You've prayed for God to remove it. You don't understand. But let me tell you, God's ways are higher than yours. Your boyfriend, girlfriend breaks up with you and you're just crushed. Or the guy you're talking to ghosts you and you're crushed because that was the one. But you have no idea the one that God has coming for you one day, and then when you're happily married with 5 kids and you look back and you see, God, I get it now. Or you don't get into the college that you wanted to go to, or you don't get the job that you applied for, and it doesn't work out, but then later you find yourself exactly where you needed to be. And you say, now I see. But see, it may not always be the upgrade. It may just be that it's different than what you expected. You have a child born with that deformity, born handicapped, and you don't understand, and you ask God why. But that child ends up becoming such a blessing years down the road, and as you look back and you see the joy that has been brought into your life from that, or in the tragic death of a loved one, when that time comes, and you would never wish it on anybody else, and you still think it's not right and it's not fair, but as years go by, you can look back and say, look at what God did through that. Look at how God used that. Eternity is going to be different because of something I didn't understand. on-demand God does not exist. God doesn't exist to serve us. No, we exist to serve him. And as we serve him with all our hearts, we can know and we can be assured that his ways are always loving. His heart is always for us. His ways are always higher. And third and lastly, his presence is always enough. God's presence is always enough. And with this one, let me make you a promise. Because maybe you're not yet a follower of Jesus, or you're a relatively new follower of Jesus, you're still learning. If you'll go beyond complacent Christianity, and what I mean by that is just going to church when you can, kind of taking a back seat to the whole Christianity thing, not really being serious about your faith, but if you'll go beyond that, and you'll truly begin pursuing God, you will get to know his character. You will get to know his nature in such a way that years from now, you'll have the deepest assurance that he is your rock. You'll be able to say, I don't have to worry about what happens to me because I know that my God is with me. See, I don't have to worry what's going to happen to me when I know that my God is with me. I don't have to worry. Why? Because I know he's good. Because I know that he's promised to never leave me and never forsake me because he is with me. This is the posture of a guy in the Old Testament, King David. And this is the stance he had when he talked about the intimacy of trusting God when things don't make sense. And if you hear the name King David and you think, man, everything must have been easy for him. He was the king. How hard could this guy's life really be? Nah, man, this dude cried out to God more than any of us put together. All throughout Scripture, we read David just crying out to God, why are you allowing this? Why am I on the run? Where are you, God? Why are you letting my enemies do this? This doesn't seem fair. He had more dark valleys than most of us will ever know about. And yet, as he grew to know the faithfulness of God, here's what David said in Psalm 23. He says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, the valley of the shadow of death, he says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. And why? For you are with me. Even if I walk through a place where I could die, even though I walk through a place where there's no nourishment, even though I walk through a place where there's people looking for me, people are on the attack, even though I walk through the darkest point in my life, I don't have to be afraid. Because you're here, God. Because your presence is always enough. Listen, there have been times in my life where things have got dark. But let me tell you, from that, I've learned that sometimes things have to go dark in order for you to see the light. Sometimes you can better experience the presence of God in the valleys of life than you do on the mountaintops. Because what happens is you start to understand the faithfulness of God in the valleys of life, not just recognizing his power on the mountaintops. Sometimes I'm convinced that until God is all you have, you'll never realize that he is all you need. Right? Until you realize God is all that you have, you'll never truly know that he's all you need. I want to believe, but God, where are you? Why didn't you do what I prayed for? I know you could, but you didn't. God doesn't exist to serve us. We exist to serve him, to bring glory to him. And so when you don't understand, you can trust his heart. And you may be sitting out there saying, so what you're saying is God isn't going to do what I want. Right? God's not going to do what I want. He's not going to answer every prayer the way I want. And for some of you, that may seem like a negative, but hear me out. No. No, God is not going to do everything that you want. And you know why? Because my God is way too powerful. My God is way too strong. My God is way too sovereign and way too good to be a puppet for men. No, my God is the creator and the sustainer of the universe. He is the one who knows the beginning and the end. He is the one who created us. He is the one who is changing us. He is the one who has made us to exist to bring him glory. He's made us with this one very purpose. And so when something doesn't go as planned, we can trust that he is just using us and conforming us and changing us and making us more like Christ. And so when you don't understand, don't turn your back on God. Don't harden your heart. Don't close him out. Instead, remember, he's always loving. His ways are always higher. And his presence, the same presence that is in this room right now, his presence is always enough. So I don't know where you're at. This may have been your heart at one point. It may be your heart tonight. That you've been saying, God, why? God, I don't understand. And maybe it's closed you off to God a little bit. Because maybe you've been mad with him. You've been upset with God. And that's okay. He can handle that. But let me tell you, an on-demand God does not exist. And so if you need to reconnect with the one true God tonight, do that. Because hopefully you've seen that his heart is loving. He is for you, not against you. And while there are things in this life that we don't understand, we can trust in his faithfulness. We can trust that he has a way mapped out for us if we will just simply trust and obey. And so wherever you're at tonight, I encourage you, come to God. And maybe you're not a follower of Christ. You don't have a relationship with him. And if that is the case, then it would be easy for you to look around at life and fold in those darkest valleys when there's things you don't understand. Because apart from God, we have no hope in those valleys. But with him, we know that this is not the end. While this isn't what I would have chosen, this isn't the way I would have done it, I can trust he has a plan. And so maybe you just need to talk with someone tonight because there are things going on in your life you don't understand. And maybe you don't expect a leader or a friend to be able to make it make sense, but you just need someone else to know and be there with you and pray with you and walk with you through this and help you remember the faithfulness of God on the hard days. I would encourage you, find a group, find a leader. Be open and honest about the things going on that you don't understand. Not because we have all the answers in this room, but because there are people here that will be faithful to walk with you and pray with you and point you back to the one whose ways are higher, whose heart is loving. And so however God is leading you to respond in this time, you do so however the Lord leads.